On January 9, 2014, 10,000 gallons of 4-methylcyclohexane methanol, or MCHM, mixed with 5.6% propylene glycol phenyl ethers, or PPH, was released into the Elk River due to the failure of a tank and secondary containment. The mixture leaked from a 48,000 capacity above ground storage tank, or AST, at the Etowah River Terminal facility. The MCHM and PPH mixture entered the soil and eventually migrated to the Elk River by moving through the soil, gravel, and water systems located under the facility until finally reaching the water. The Freedom facility was located about 1.5 miles upstream from the intake of West Virginia American Water Company. The company provides water to over 580,000 citizens in West Virginia, including residents and industrial clients. When the leak occurred at Freedom, up to 300,000 residents and industrial users in 9 counties were impacted. Now, the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection received odor complaints early on the morning of January 9, 2014, and arrived on site at 11:15 that day and identified the release at the base of T396. It wasn't until 5:45 p.m., or over 5 hours later, that the West Virginia American Water Company issued a do not use order, and at 9:30 that night, the governor issued a state of emergency order to West Virginia. The following morning, January 10th, President Obama declared a federal disaster area for the 9 counties impacted by the leak. In the days following the release, there were several announcements communicated to the public regarding water usage. On January 13th, the West Virginia American Water Company advised the flushing of water systems. On January 15th, the CDC issued a water advisory for pregnant women to drink bottled water. On January 21st, Freedom revealed that PPH was in the mixture released into the water supply in addition to the MCHM. On February 5th, a spokesman from the CDC, or Center for Disease Control, announced that the water was appropriate for use. However, odor complaints continued in many area schools reported closures over the following days and weeks. On February 21st, the CDC issued a statement that described the water as safe. However, the CSB found the message to be obscure and it was not widely communicated. In late February, the governor of West Virginia lifted the state of emergency order, and in March, the CDC announced that no adverse health effects from MCHM in concentrations below 10 parts per billion. Though the governor's office has lifted the water advisories and the CDC has declared the water safe for drinking, residents continue to distrust the information that the water is safe. A lingering odor remained in the water after CDC declared the water was appropriate for use. The long-term health impacts of MCHM and PPH at low concentration remains unknown. Now I'll turn the proceedings over to Ms. Tyler from this part.
Thank you. From January 9th to January 23rd, 2014, the West Virginia Bureau of Public Health reviewed 369 records of patients who had symptoms and reported exposure to the water. 13 of the 369 patients were hospitalized. The rest were treated and released with intravenous fluids and medications to reduce the effects of exposure, such as nausea and skin irritations. People were most commonly exposed to the chemicals in the water from bathing and showering. Other routes of exposure were ingestion and inhalation, and some patients reported exposure to more than one possible type for their symptoms. In preliminary health impact data provided by the Kanawha County Health Department, common complaints included nausea, 38%, skin rash, 28.5%, and vomiting, 28%. The Kanawha County Health Department reported that these symptoms are consistent with known health effects of MCHM, and those are based on very limited animal studies. One of the preliminary findings related to the public health impact is that there is limited toxicological information on MCHM, PPH, and their chemical constituents. The CSB reviewed toxicological data from the MCHM manufacturer and found that there is little data available on exposures at low concentrations. Almost all the studies for MCHM include short-term exposures to high doses of MCHM. Also, the material safety data sheets, or MSDSs, did not provide information on the potential health hazards to assist in a timely notification of water usage restrictions. And now Mr. Banks will return to the podium to discuss the tank inspections at Freedom Industries.
Thank you. Oop. The CSB commissioned an inspection of the tank from which the tank leak occurred and similar tanks at the Freedom Industries facility. Testing included a scanning of the tank, the interior, the surrounding topography of the facility and the riverbank, and portions of the tank were cut out and set for metallurgical examinations, which are yet to be conducted. And we've got a short video that shows some of the work that went on that I'd like to share with you. Now this is some activity just prior to openings being cut into the tank for access for removal of portions of the metal. This is the tank where the leak was most prominent. This is the technique that was used to cut the samples. It's a high pressure water cutting technique, which minimized the risk of the folks that were doing the work in the presence of possible flammable atmospheres. They used a high pressure water system and were able to conduct all the cutting that we wanted on the tanks. The tanks themselves, this is the area, the main section of the tank where the holes were noted. Here we have the two holes. One is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, the other a little bit less than 1/2 inch. And as you'll see in later slides, there's a series of other characteristics that indicate potential failure sites as well. This is the technique that was used to cut the samples that are called coupons. They're round sections of the tank that we gathered. There were other representatives from plaintiffs and the company there also to observe the removal of these pieces of equipment. And post-cutting, we did a pretty thorough inspection of the site to make sure that all the samples that we needed for steps moving forward were gathered. Now, preliminarily, one of the early findings in this case, the inspections were conducted in accordance with the best practices today, which are the test methods as found in API 653. The API 653 inspection clearly indicated that the holes in T396 were a mechanism for the large spill that occurred on January 9th, 2014. And these are those two holes that I just pointed out, the 3/4 inch hole and the little bit more than 1/2 inch. But then you'll also see that there is some pitting observed here, which indicates areas that would have potentially failed as well. In this slide there was a deformation in the tank wall. And we've cut this section of the tank out and will subject this to analysis as well to determine if there might have been any leaking that occurred there prior to January 9th. The final determination on the failure mechanism will be made through forensic examination of the metals that we have extracted from the tanks at a lab that we've selected for the test to be conducted. We'll examine the corrosion modeling by an AST above ground storage tank expert. And preliminarily, there is growing evidence that the holes did not originate from outside the tank, but from within, due to the characteristics that we noted earlier where, as you will note here, this hole is bored through. This hole is a little bit smaller, and these are ones that appear to be forming. And so as we proceed with this investigation, we're going to subject this portion of the tank to a really close analysis to determine if the failure did occur or the corrosion from the inside. To date, we have not found any records of inspections that would indicate rigorous, programmatic, regular inspection frequency, and the lack of engineering inspections and prescribing that would prescribe the frequency and the rigor is something that is noteworthy for our findings so far. Tank 397, another tank that also contained MCHM and PPH mixture, had a hole in it. And this to us indicates that there was the possibility of a leak from that tank as well. That's an area of interest for us moving forward that we will pursue to determine if this hole was leaking material, and if so, the amounts that might have been leaked from the tank prior to or after up to January 9th this year. Due to the extensive corrosion that the CSB suspects that the leaks existed prior to January 9th. One of the key indicators from these findings is that the multiple pitting and metallurgical damage to 396 and other tanks in MCHM service. This is the hole that was observed in T397 and an area that we will continue to pursue. This is the deformation that I noted earlier on the tank wall. In this slide, we've got the depiction of the API 653 diagram of the corrosion that was observed on T396, which is located here. But if you'll note, on T395 there were areas of concern as well, and 397 where the hole, which was located right in this area. And it's important to note that these API 653 tests were conducted by multiple API 653 proficient experts. The CSB commissioned our own expert, but there were several other API 653 inspectors on site that day, and they used their own independent devices, but they have a marking system to denote where the corrosion was, and because for good or bad, the conditions were kind of wet, so as one API 653 inspector would conclude his work would be obscured because the surface of the tank was wet, and the chalk markings would be obliterated. But over the course of the 2 days that these tests were conducted, it looked like a child's hopscotch area in terms of the number of areas that the corrosion were noted by the independent inspections that were ongoing. So these are key indicators to us that there was a serious corrosion problem growing in all the tanks, and it just manifested itself in 396, the worst, but 397 is showing signs of that type of failure, the multiple pitting, the pattern that we noted in 396, and then the fact that there were possibly holes in the roof that led to water entering into the tank and pooling in areas. There was an odd shape that's associated with the holes in 396. We think that the water may have lay there and kind of facilitated the corrosion that we noted. Moving forward, as we continue with the investigation, we'll subject the metal that we've extracted from these tanks to a metallurgical examination. We will hope to bring about a computer modeling of the release, and that would take into consideration the topography of the site itself, the lay of the land, so to speak, and help to determine, why the material would flow the way that it did, how we'll find access to the Elk River. We'll examine any information that speaks to the public health impact. It's of import to this agency, the one that we would consign to agencies and organizations that are proficient to speak to those issues, but we have a keen interest in following those developments. We would also look at the regulation of above ground storage tanks to see the applicability of existing rules and if there's a need to strengthen or implement new rules. We would look at the tank siting of a chemical plant with this close to a water intake system. Obviously that's something of keen interest to us. We'll also look at the evolution of the water treatment intake systems, the nature of that process, and any changes that might be necessary moving forward. And then also the emergency planning and notification process that took place when this incident occurred. These are some of the key areas that we will be pursuing as we move forward. That concludes the update on the Freedom Industries investigation, but we're happy to entertain any questions that the board might have.